Florentino, Mateus, Soares, Ferreira, President of the National Petroleum and Minerals Authority, Timor-Leste. It is Matthias Hartung, Chair of the ad hoc, or member of the ad hoc group, Chair of the ad hoc group. I forget which it is.
I'd say member of
the UNFC Standards and Commercial EGRM Commercial Applications Working Group. Sorry about that. Ghadi Sabra, we see again, lead of the EGRM Resource Management Young Member Group and UNECE Consultant. Claudia Baranzelli, GeoSpatial Lab, OECD, and Maxat Bektayev. I'm not saying that right. Managing Director of LLP BMC Kazakhstan. So without further ado, I think we should just dive straight in. I'm going to take people in this order. So Mr. Florentino, Mateus, Soares, Ferreira, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Karen. It's again a very good afternoon to all of us. I hope that everyone still stay enthusiastic this afternoon. Of course, this afternoon we're coming all the way from 12,000 kilometers away from Geneva, and I'm going to present to you a story from Timor-Leste. So my presentation's title is The Road Towards Building the Largest Carbon Capture and Storage in the World. So basically, we are going to share with you the preparations that we have in Timor-Leste for this particular carbon capture and storage. For those of you who might not be familiar with Timor-Leste, I probably just take you through the facts about Timor-Leste. We are pretty much half the size of Belgium. Our population is relatively small, 1.3 million by 2023 this year. Our official languages are Portuguese, Tetum. Our working languages are Indonesian and English. Our economy is heavily dependent on oil and gas, tourism, agriculture, and of course, for those of you who are coffee lovers, we have the best coffee from Timor. And our currency is USD. So just to brush up a bit your geography, we are located north of Australia, squeezing between Australia and Indonesia, a tiny half-island nation. The connectivity to Timor-Leste can be coming through Bali in Indonesia, Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, Australia, even all the way from Europe, from Portugal. So our understanding of our energy and resources started off from a couple of centuries ago, since the Portuguese sort of settlement in the country. So dating back from Portuguese area, Japanese occupations during World War II, and then Indonesian occupations from 1975 all the way to 1999, and then post-independence. That's pretty much how we have been sort of introduced to the energy and resources in the country. Of course, we gained control over our resources and energy sector only 18 years ago. But we believe that ingredients for successful extractive industries in a country like Timor should be pillared in several elements that I highlighted here. First and foremost, having to have a robust regulatory frameworks and fiscal regime, attractive fiscal regime. Fortunately, we followed the footstep of the Norwegian, setting up our petroleum farm in order to avoid the the Dutch disease and also the curse of the natural resources. We're also a member of Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative. And I think the next important element in achieving a successful extractive industry sort of program or sort of pillar is the data availability. That's pretty much the 18 years of recipes that we've strived through and putting in place the state's extractive industries. Over the years, we are also trying to catching up with the rest of the world. And of course, we are integrating our energy sectors and resource sectors into energy transitions and decarbonizations commitment. As of 2021, we signed an MOU with one of our operating companies in offshore of Timor, of our one depleting gas fields called Bayundan. So the MOU pretty much outlined the commitment from Timor-Leste's government going forward to transforming these depleting gas fields to carbon capture and storage. The potential markets we have in the region is approximately 12 million ton per annum. The capacity, the storage capacity is approximately 10 million ton per annum, but that's constrained to the pipeline capacity that is currently piping the gas to Northern Territory in Australia. The targeted project start up by 2025. So as you can see in the map, Bayundan is located between Timor and Australia. So there are a number of gas fields in Australia that require a solution, mainly because they have high concentrations of CO2. And the Australian government is not quite happy with a continuous commitment from the companies to develop these gas fields. So you can see at the graph, we have more than 12 million ton per annum potential demand of our CCS. These are pretty much from the gas fields in Australia, but some international imports as well. Oftentimes, people question us that why does a small country like Timor wants to commit to a net zero carbon? Our emission rate is 0.0034%. My answer is simple. I know that we don't have Al Gore in Timor-Leste, but I think what we need to do is also look at the global perspective. So normally people oftentimes say, think global, act local. In Timor-Leste, we change this. We think that we need to start thinking global and act local, act global as well. The issue with climate change is real. And of course, we have experienced frequent climate sort of alterations over the last couple of years. And in Timor, we felt that as well. Secondly, we see that there's an investment opportunity for this project. I know that some of us agree that CCS is not a lucrative project like oil and gas, but it is still an investment opportunity for a country the size of Timor. And we believe that having to have the largest CCS in the world, we will become a regional leader. And that's pretty much the aspirations why we want to pretty much move forward with the largest CCS in our region. It is critically important to assess Southeast Asia energy demands and what can we contribute to the regions and beyond. I think let's look at the statistic for a while. Asia Pacific accounts for pretty much 60% of the world population, 4.5, 4.6 billion. In 2050, it is projected that the world populations will increase to 9 billion. And of course, that would definitely affect the populations in Southeast Asia and Asia Pacific. And of course, that would definitely have a cascading or domino effect to the energy demand in the region. ASEAN Energy Outlook predicted that Southeast Asia energy demand will rise by 60% in 2040. And yet over 40% of the energy are imported. Most of the countries used to be exported in Southeast Asia are now becoming an imported countries for the energy. China alone accounts for 25% of the energy demand, and yet around 67% of the Chinese crude in 2019 came from imports. This is adding to the equation. We have recent Russia and Ukraine conflict contributed to an unstable sort of supply and demand in the energy as well. So Timor-Leste sees that the region itself, Timor-Leste, Indonesia, Australia, has more than 50 TCF to be relied on, trillion cubic feet of gas, to be ready to be tapped in and be the solution to the energy demands in the regions and beyond for the next decades. And of course, with that in mind, we know that we have to also balance the commitment of net zero target by 2050. So our Bayu-Undan CCS would become the first mover in the region. It will provide a solution to these gas fields in Timor Sea and Australian water. It will also become a solution to blue hydrogen emissions. And of course, securing the gas and energy supply in the region and beyond. Of course, this will also serve as a solution to the industrial CO2 to the countries in the region, like Japan, South Korea, Singapore, and other countries in the regions. And we've been discussing with some of these countries in relation to they becoming the potential sort of a customer of our CCS. These are the works that we are currently undertaking together with our operating company. So we have existing facilities. We have a platform, we have wells, injection wells, we have pipelines, and also we have onshore facilities that could account for these particular projects to take place. We have a good knowledge of the subsurface over the last of 20 plus years in relation to this particular reservoir. So we have carried out sufficient studies. We have modeled 20 years of the CO2 sort of plume behaviors. So we believe that we have a good knowledge. And looking into the plan that we have in the diagram or in the schematic sort of pictures beneath, we literally realized that there will be CO2 coming from south, which is basically from Australia, and the pipeline constrained to a capacity of 10 million ton per annum. But we'll also realize that there will be CO2 coming from north, from industrial sort of countries, industrialized countries like Japan, South Korea, Singapore, and many others that needs this CO2 storage. So the plan is for us to build a CCS hub intermediate storage either in onshore or offshore of Timor, and then we'll have LCO2, the liquid CO2 vessel serving as a shuttle, bringing this CO2 from the countries of origin, the customers' sort of plants to Timor-Leste or to directly to be injected at the Bayu-Undan field. So these are pretty much the work that we are currently undertaking. And in terms of the where we are, particularly in relation to the legal and regulatory framework, as well as a fiscal arrangement, we have established our core CCS team within our organizations. We have also signed a cooperation agreement with IFC in developing the regulatory and fiscal framework for our CCS, together with some of the renowned legal firms from the region, particularly from Norway. We know exactly that Norway has Northern Lights, and of course we want to learn from the Norwegian as well. We have also signed a joint study with SKENS in South Korea to explore the CCS terminal hubs options in either onshore or offshore Timor-Leste. And we've also actively participating in conference and training, as well as some other capacity building programs in order to gain more experience. And we're actively talking to the potential CO2 suppliers in the regions. And of course, we're looking forward to see this as a one particular solution for us combating the issue of climate change and ultimately achieving the net zero carbon by 2050. So To sum up, I would like to acknowledge our partners, Santos, IFC, IRM Law, Asters, SKENS, and there's one particular quote from IEA 2020 Energy Technology Perspective, saying that, I quote, reaching net zero will be virtually impossible without CCUS. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. I think what we'll do is we'll go through the different presentations and then we'll open up for questions at the end if there's time. I'm sure that you're going to get some feedback on your presentation. It was very interesting. Now, Matthias Hartung will tell us a little bit about some work of the Commercial Applications Working Group. Go ahead, Matthias.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Can you hear me all right? Excuse me. So thanks for staying here until Friday evening. And I'm also very happy that we still have quite a number of country representatives here, because this topic may interest you all. What brings us together is resource management and assuring sustainability. What the UN and the UNECE and the EGRM have done over the years is develop a classification framework and a resource management system, UNFC and UNRMS. And what we believe is, given the urgency and given the challenges that we have, there is more value in those through widespread and rapid adoption. So Sigurd, thank you very much, and myself, we have been looking at what can we do. And this is a proposal to create an adoption group that looks exactly at that. What does it take to accelerate widespread adoption of UNFC and UNRMS? So what's the background? What's the problem? I think it's fair to say that about over 2 decades of development in UNFC and also recently in UNRMS have already gone in with the X group of resource management, and it has settled within the group and their affiliation. So quite a of you in the room, in fact, I believe all of you in the room know very well what this is all about. Adoption is happening, and is happening recently much more, spreading across geological surveys, authorities and academia. And it's been used primarily for reporting and disclosure purposes, mostly within sectors. What's the problem? Well, I think after all this development work, it's fair to say that UNFC and also UNRMS is starting to get known outside of the wider group of EGRM. There's a huge potential out there. The report, the use cases that we see are all very well intended, but we see a variety and variability in how it's being adopted. Now, some of that may be good when the purpose is multifold, but there is also inconsistency in the way data is collected, in the way it's been presented. There's quite a number of inconsistency which may not help over time. Primarily, we believe that the uniqueness and the value of UNFC and UNRMS is yet to be realized. And what I mean primarily here is it has the potential to become a decision support tool for making resource management decisions and for managing resource projects, and for comparing them across sectors, across nations, and across the maturity of projects. We all know about this, but I've hardly seen examples where this has been actually adopted as a decision support tool. And I'm sure I've overseen 1 or 2 of you, and you say, no, you're wrong. It has been done, but not in that big numbers yet. And then, of course, we have been discussing all across the week the recent urgency and importance to support the challenges that we all see and face and work towards: energy and critical raw material resilience, affordability, the sustainability, and the security of those. So the challenge that we put forward is, are we ready for widespread adoption? What is missing? And basically what we say is, oops, next, yeah. This is a proposal to you, to the EGRM, that we want to find out. We want to find out with an adoption group, We used to call them adoption standard group in the proposal. We think it's more than standards, and I'm coming to that, but certainly it also includes how we implement and recommend standards. So what we want to do is basically just two things. We want to analyze what are the challenges towards widespread adoption, and we want to propose a solution or solutions to overcome those challenges. We don't want to make this in a 5-year plan. We want to use simplicity and speed to address the urgency and importance of the matter. In other words, this year. And we want to build and be very inclusive to the wide range of independent, high quality and broad EGRM expertise that probably makes the UNECE expert group very unique. So what's the purpose and the scope of the group? I said two things: provide a gaps analysis and provide a solution. We have started in a workshop on Monday and there's another one on Thursday because not everyone could attend, and kind of collecting what it is that we should be looking at. And this is a long list that I have just abbreviated here for the sake of time. But there are basically 3 streams that come out. One is, let's look at it from a decision maker and user perspective. So here you are the country representatives. What are your mining authorities, your energy authorities, your developing support organizations? What are your environmental organizations needing to use UNFC and get the benefit from UNFC? So we certainly want to know exactly from your perspective, what is the blocker and the barrier to using that? 2, there are barriers to adoption around standards. Just think about the assurance of recommended standards, the implementation, the consistency, the monitoring, the support. Think about competencies, think about help desk. Yeah, we heard this the other day. Where can I go to have my UNFC implementation certified so that the data that I'm collecting can be regarded as trustworthy? In other words, consistent, comparable, and transparent. And that's not to say that government or authorities need to disclose data, but at least internally, when they collect the data, they want to use it to make decisions. 2, we see legislation coming our way. The EU is preparing the Raw Materials Act, in which I think 4 times the UNFC adoption has been mandated. We see countries, we see industry sectors, professional associations mandating UNFC adoption. 3, there may be other barriers that we haven't thought about, but they may be very important. So we want to be open to that and focus then on the most important ones. The third one, which is important, of course, and we talked about that, is building alliances and bridging. Are we, as the EGRM, are we having the right connects with, for instance, ISSB, SEC, the Extractive Initiative, or Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative, just to mention a few. We don't want a peripheral of standards. We want harmonization and consistency in standards so that we can compare and contrast projects in resource management. 2, once we've identified the gaps, we want to look at solutions. And we want to propose back to the EGRM how these could be filled. We're not arguing that we would be filling those and executing those proposals. We're just arguing here that we want to provide a document that proposes solutions that is then for EGRM to take up. The proposed way ahead is, next month we want to do a terms of reference of the adoption group for the approval of the Bureau on behalf of the EGRM. We don't want to wait another year until we get together again. We certainly want speed, which is of the essence. And therefore, we will propose a terms of reference, which will include proposed structure of the adoption group, which will also propose a home for the adoption group within the EGRM. As we know, there's different proposals and different thoughts in the room. We will then, assuming we get approval, invite contributing qualified experts. Of course, diversity and inclusion is key, but also making sure it's not too large, the group, so it can be function as a working group. Functioning to consult, interview, and draft the 2 documents for gaps analysis and solution proposal. All of that within this year. I believe if we don't deliver by the end of the year, we've missed the point. Just an example of what visualization could look like of adopting UNFC. This is a mock-up example, which I have shown 2 years ago. So you can read it up in the EGRM 12 documentation. To the left, you see a map, a world map, and to the right, you see basically a comparison of 3 projects. These are projects taken out of literature. So if you like, it's literature data. It's a mock-up case, it's not a real case, but the data is taken from literature. And it's comparing a solar project towards a hydrocarbon project versus a hydroelectric project, so a dam. And it compares not only the delivery in energy in exajoules in the E111 category, but it also compares the emissions of CO2 equivalent to cover the first order magnitude of environmental impact, to look at the construction length and when it can deliver to start producing. What is the employment? What is the employment in country during construction, during operation? What is the financial requests? Just to say a few of the numbers that you would collect to compare and contrast those projects. And as you see, none of them is net zero. They all have an environmental impact. If we just think about the greenhouse gas emissions, but they all have an employment figures, which is good for economy and good for social aspects. And of course, they have financial and economic numbers to compare. So this is the power of UNFC to compare and contrast projects and make decisions, and also engage financial capital allocators, engage the social communities and the public at large when decisions have to be made on choices. So I want to finish with conclusion and recommendations as they're currently standing in the conclusion and recommendations. We basically asked for the expert group to agree and to this proposal, and then we could start going forward, deliver on those, starting with the TOR. I don't want to finish without saying acknowledgements for a lot of people. During the workshops on Monday and Tuesday and Thursday, but primarily also in this room, I've talked a lot with others, and there was an overwhelming strong support, a lot of good discussions. So it feels like making adoption ready now, or making adoption, widespread adoption work, is really in the forefront of most of your minds. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah, thank you, Matthias. We will rapidly move on again and take comments and questions from the floor when we're done with all the presentations. So the next speaker is Ghadi Sabra again on titanium for the future. How can Italy develop its mineral resources sustainability? Go ahead.
Thank you, Karen. I'll try to be brief and stick to my time. Okay, so this presentation will be giving an overview on a UNFC case study applied to the Piampaludo titanium exploration project in Liguria, Italy. So this titanium deposit is reported to be one of the greatest titanium deposits in Europe, yet it remains bounded by social and environmental contingencies. So the case aims at introducing UNFC to the raw material sector in Italy. Of course, the country has several mineral deposits with which many are critical raw materials, but no formal national classification system for raw materials. 2 is to classify the project, of course, using UNFC for the sustainable decision making and feeding or enriching the Ligurian mineral inventory. And lastly, to provide a new approach for UNFC, basically answering the question of what happens when you know you have a resource or deposit, but you can only use publicly available information. For context, titanium is important for the sustainable development in Europe. So as many of you know, it has been listed as both critical and strategic in the latest assessment report. So titanium is directly linked to sustainable development through supporting renewables and energy efficiency. For instance, in buildings and construction material, by applying a titanium dioxide coating on the exterior surface of a building can significantly lessen interior temperature creeps and because it reflects direct solar infrared rays, thus decreases the urban heat island effect and eliminates the need for internal cooling. It also improves renewables, serves battery innovation, and of course, it's highly used in the field of medical technology. So for this UNFC classification, it was necessary to collect and compile as much data as possible. Now, the company or the project owner were not very responsive, so we had to rely on publicly available information from literature, academic and scientific research, lab and field test, online publications, and exploration projects. So all these data, they contributed to a comprehensive understanding of the regional geology, as well as the titanium, the ore mineralogy. We now know that the titanium deposit is found in eclogites as rutile, which is the titanium ore mineral, with some garnet and other associated minerals. The ore tonnage equates 9 million tons with an ore grade of 6%, with enrichments up to 12%. However, some studies suggest that this weight can increase up to 20 million tons as we go deeper, so deeper than 500 meters. For the technical aspect, Compagnia Europea per il Titanio, CET, which is an Italian mining and exploration company, earned a mining concession over the Piampaludo project in 1985. So during that period, CET conducted a pre-feasibility study, which led to the development of a comprehensive mining plan supported by field test and surface developments, such as shaft, adits, and trenches. With all these data, the mining plan developed for the recovery of rutile with the garnet as a byproduct. Now, the mining plan is relevant because it helped us strengthen our understanding of the area, the geology, and the ore itself. So Piampaludo, ever since its discovery, hasn't been exploited. So the main concern raised around this project is that the Piampaludo titanium deposit is partially located in a natural regional park, the Begwa Park, which is home to more than 1,000 species of fauna and flora with 26 different types of ecosystems. So the park raised the social and environmental concerns for the preservation of the landscape and these ecosystems. As a result, social consent is not granted for mining activities, with continuous opposition from various association, park authorities, and neighboring municipalities. So quickly on the classification, the geology of the Piampaludo project, the Piampaludo titanium deposit, as well as the titanium mineralization, are well studied and known. So the titanium quantities have reasonable amounts, have reasonable probabilities to equate the forecasted amount. Yet it is necessary to mention that many of these studies were conducted between 1979 and 1998. Thus, the titanium of the Piampaludo were given a G3 plus G4 classification on the G-axis. For the E-axis, in 2021, CET reapplied and earned an exploration permit or right until 2024. So this permit allows them to carry out investigation on the part of the deposit that does not overlap with the park realms, despite the social opposition. From an environmental point of view, CET is expected to carry out an environmental impact assessment to help them solidify their case, and which will serve well for the project's viability in the future. Economically speaking, given the ore weight and grade, it is valued to be at a minimum of 120 billion euros. Now, currently, with the constant opposition, the advancement of the project is not expected to become viable in the near future or the foreseeable future. So the Piampaludo project was given an E3.2 classification on the E-axis. Lastly and quickly, the technical feasibility of the project is given an F2.2 classification, having the preliminary developments provided data on the possibility for advanced development, but further data acquisition and studies are required to confirm the feasibility of development. To conclude, the Piampaludo titanium deposit is one of the greatest titanium deposits in the EU, with possible significant economic importance in the near future, with the ability to eliminate the titanium supply risk in Italy and possibly in Europe. So the project is currently in hiatus due to the social and environmental contingencies. Now, I'd like to note that according to UNFC, byproducts are to be classified. However, in this study, the garnet classification is omitted. When titanium recovery becomes viable, then it will be necessary to classify the garnet as byproduct separately. Now, this study uses a different approach. So it addresses the question of how to deal with a deposit where you only have limited information. However, it provided valuable insights into the resource for decision-making purposes. In addition, it can serve the Ligurian mineral inventory, which is very much needed to assemble national databases for resource management. Now, of course, if additional information does become available, the conclusions drawn from the study will need to be revised. Lastly, the question of how to move the project forward is in the hands of the Italian judicial and political system. Thank you. And you can revise the study. It's now published as a parliamentary document on the UNECE website.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Claudia Baranzelli. Selli. Close. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. And I apologize in advance for my voice. So for the sake of it, indeed, I'll keep it very, very short and I'll be telegraphic. So the title, I think, drives a little bit away from you have heard so far. And I'll speak mostly about geospatial data. So I'll go very, very local, actually, still staying in a global context, but I'll speak about very local data. And I'll also mention the concept of strategic corridors and how these two components can help the mapping, the future of sustainable development. I work at the OECD, so the International Organizations for Economic Development and Cooperation, and I'd like to start introducing the GeoSpatial Lab, which is a voluntary initiative that I'm leading and fairly recent also, and whose goal is, in a nutshell, to encourage the adoption of geospatial analysis quite broadly to support the policymaking process. Being it an initiative that's voluntary, its organization is very, very agile, so you can picture it as an international community of stakeholders who are interested in geospatial data and geospatial analysis. What's important to say is that this community is open to external institutions, external members, and they can come from very different backgrounds. They can come from the academia, they can be other international organizations, national offices, but also private stakeholders. And just to mention a couple of objectives that we have, of course, on the networking side, we want to facilitate the exchange and the knowledge sharing. And we are also working on principles and standards for the aggregation, harmonizations, and interoperability of geospatial data. And we want to do this in a rather, at least I'd like to think of it as such, a rather pragmatic way. So we do want to work on specific case studies, and we do want to showcase policies that can enable innovation. On the slide, the very bottom of it, I've reported the web link where you can find some information about the lab. I'm quite happy to say, though, that there are a lot of ongoing discussions right now. And so the information that you can find there, I'm afraid, is still slightly outdated, but I hope to be able to add new information very soon. So I encourage you to keep an eye on it. As I said, there are lots of ongoing discussions, especially between some members about which topics, which specific questions in some cases we want to work on, and they can go in many different directions. One of them is actually related to the concept of strategic corridors. And to introduce this to you, actually I have to go back to my previous job when I was working for the European Commission. And very recently in 2021, we have developed this concept within the framework of the Global Gateway initiative. Some of you might have heard of it. In a nutshell, our job was to develop a methodology based on geospatial data and statistical data together that would enable us to prioritize investments focused on transport infrastructures. From the European Commission, they wanted to do this not just looking at one sector, so the transport sector, but adopting a wider approach, what I may call a territorial approach. So looking at how these type of investments could support the territorial development in many different ways. So looking at the well-being of local communities, but also at how different sectors other than transport one would be affected. And among these sectors, the mining was, of course, was included. So together with some of my colleagues and my collaborators, we decided to dig in a little bit more about this and see whether we could actually relate these concepts. So the concept of strategic corridors and the concept of critical raw materials. So is it possible to devise an approach that can help us to reach both regional development and security of supply? We did a preliminary study that we have recently published. You see the cover page on the slides. Again, a rather initial and preliminary study, but quite important. We start looking at mining properties, respect to the location and the development of the strategic corridors, and trying to look at first important characteristics of these mining properties. Now here there are some examples of data that we used, but for the sake of time, I'll skip them. But I invite you to have a look at the paper. And now let's say the challenge that we have, and this is the topic that we are discussing with also some members of the Geospatial Lab at the OECD, is how to go forward. So from this initial study, how can we change the scale of investigation to go more in depth and to study specific sections or parts of these corridors in order to gain some more insights in what's happening there. So again, working local, but in a global context. So keeping in mind that we are actually dealing with global value chains. And so we want indeed to see if at a lower scale, it's possible to better understand how mineral resources can act as a catalyzer in order to create, and in some cases to strengthen, value chains and also territorial organization. So I really hope that these ongoing discussions will go well. And I do invite who of you might be interested in knowing more to contact me and to have a look at the Geospatial Lab activities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claudia. And that brings us to the last speaker in the panel, Maxat Bektayev, Managing Director at PMC Kazakhstan. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Secretary, for presenting me as a speaker on this panel. It was a long day. I was trying to make my presentation as short as possible. So, as we know, Kazakhstan is the first place in the world of uranium mining. This is happening because of using SUTI leaching technology. This technology ensures the extraction of uranium without using pits, minings, crushing, and other ways of mines. On the other hand, uranium deposits are associated with other metals like gold, platinum, and other group of metals. So main purpose of this project is the selection of technology for extraction of associated metals on closed blocks of uranium deposits. Today, Kazakhstan have many of uranium deposits has already been worked out. For more than 60% wells have already been closed. It is several thousand wells in only one mining. There is valuable metals remained in closed blocks, such as gold, platinum group of metals, and rare metals. And we did some core analysis, one of the uranium deposit, and it showed the presences and the possibilities of extracting. The cost of associated metals is comparable with the total cost of uranium in deposits. So also there are 100 tons of scandium, germanium, and other elements which are officially confirmed in deposits. And the main advantage is having presence of a ready-made infrastructure, so it's no need more investments, a lot of investments. Also, we did number of research of leaching solution after the uranium sorting operation. But the study have shown the presence of these metals is very low. So commercial production was unprofitable in that case, so cannot use it. In this regard, the extraction of associated metals from closed blocks is more useful. The involvement of closed blocks in extraction of associated metals will allow to use drill wells again. At the same time, additional income will be received due to the extraction of valuable metals. So, and what we did on that, we developed a mobile complex for extraction of metals in container assembly. The mobile complex includes installation of supplying solutions and preparing experiment leaching solutions. On that case, we developed several options of leaching solutions. Also, we developed a channel extraction. So, solution flow rate in the channel extraction is 50 times higher than through a sorption column of the same diameter, so it's more effectively. One of the main problems that is difficult to extract all metals which one type of solution. For this reason, mobile comps are very useful for investigation. So here it's like our container assembly which we use it. Here's with one of the sorbent extragents which we use like for the extraction. And it's a general view of like our channel extraction and other stuff. So at the end, I will want to say like the conducted styles allow us to speak about the significant potential of the approach for the extraction of associated elements in closed area after in situ leaching of uranium, so we can reuse it. This is possible because we have the ready-made infrastructure created during uranium mining, so it's no need more investment in infrastructure. And it will be good contribution to the solution to the problem of recovery on the critical materials. Thank you.